One, say good morning to the independent member of the House of Assembly, serving the folks of Mount Pearl, Southlands, Paul Lane. Morning, Paul. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
Fine this morning, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing great, Paddy.
Good.
Paddy, the reason why I wanted to call this morning, I wanted to talk about a bill which is currently in the House of Assembly, being debated. And as a matter of fact, we were there till, I think it was pretty close to midnight last night, getting through what's known as Committee of the Whole. So the only part left now would be the third reading, and that's the new Procurement Act. And this is something that hasn't gotten, to my mind at least, hasn't gotten a big lot of attention. And given the fact that, we spend, according to what was said in the House, I think by the Minister, something like $3 to $4 billion a year on procurement, I think it's an absolutely huge issue. It might not be a real sexy issue politically, I suppose, or something that...
well, yes, it is, Paul. It absolutely is. Important. Well, it's not only important because of the amount of money, it's the air of the potential for corruption. And that's one of the sexiest headlines that has ever generated in politics. So this is a critical piece of legislation. If this act isn't tight and done right, it'll be a huge failure. So I know you've pointed to some shortcomings or gaps in the proposed legislation. Yep. What exactly are you referring to?
Okay, so first of all, Paddy, I just want to say that there is a lot of positive things that are contained in the Act. The fact that, that NALCOR is going to be brought into the Act is a positive thing. Now, that being said, there's a whole section there on exemptions, and that exempts NALCOR from a whole bunch of things, and I have a bunch of concerns about that, and I think it's a missed opportunity. But at least they are brought in for certain aspects, which they're not now. We are bringing consultants into it now, which were exempted before, that you could hire any architect or engineer you like. Now you have to go through the process. So that's a good thing in my mind. And they're going to be posting more stuff online and that. So, there are good parts about it, and I understand that there's going to be a lot of things in the regulations, according to the Minister, that he's spoken to municipalities about and would be positive for municipalities. So I don't want to come across as saying that this is all bad, because it's not, and I definitely support it in principle. But the biggest issue that I have, and I believe other members in the opposition have raised, is Sections 28 and 29. Section 28 of the Act basically says the Lieutenant Governor and Council may make regulations. And the Lieutenant Governor and Council, for those who are not familiar, that basically means the Cabinet. So the Cabinet are going to make regulations, and then it lists a whole list of regulations from A to Q. And then under Section 29, it says the Minister may make regulations, and that's respecting this new Procurement Advisory Council. And everything about that Procurement Advisory Council falls under there. So basically the issue I have and others have is that when it comes to the meat and the guts of everything around this new procurement legislation, it's all being left in the hands of the Cabinet and the Minister to decide what it's going to be. So in effect, as one member, I'm kind of voting on something blind to a great degree. I'm voting on the principle of it, and then I'm leaving it in the hands of the Cabinet to decide, work out all of the details. And one that comes to mind, I'm just looking at Section 28F just as an example. So 28F says basically the Cabinet will establish the regulations respecting the manner in which bids are to be evaluated. Now, that is a huge one. They're all very important. They're all huge. But so the Cabinet's going to decide how bids are going to be evaluated. So what does that mean? I'm voting on something saying you're going to decide how to evaluate it. Now, from questioning in the House of Assembly and commentary, what I've been led to understand is that there's going to be some kind of a point system in a matrix. Now, it doesn't say that here. It just says they're going to determine how to do it. Now, that might be a good thing. And a lot of people would argue probably it is a good thing, but I have no idea what that matrix looks like. I have no idea what weight is placed on certain things. Is there some weight for local content? Is it certain weight on bid? Is there certain weight on service? And warranties and all that. I don't know.
It's a fair comment and a fair question to ask. I guess when we are moving away, and rightfully so, from lowest bid automatically wins, because we've seen the problems that's created, I don't imagine it's even actually possible to have black and white guidelines or metrics in place, as you suggest. And I think you're on the right track here, and I'd be having the same concerns if I had sat through the committee of the whole. But how do you actually do that without putting some faith and trust in the cabinet to actually determine what constitutes a better bid than other, better value for the money, whether it be local, whether it be that a company has a certain reputation versus another bidder? It's a tricky one, and I don't know how you write that into the legislation in a tight fashion, but it's a fair point to bring up. Yeah,
Paddy, and that's the point. And the thing is too that when legislation comes before the House of Assembly, in fairness, that the regulations are done after the fact, after the act is passed, and regulations don't come to the House of Assembly. Traditionally, that's the way it's done, and I'm not saying that this is being done any differently than any other piece of legislation. However, I think that there are a lot of things here now that are left to the regulations that could be placed in the Act, or at least could be given greater clarity in the Act and greater direction in the Act. So it's there's no direction. It's just a basic framework, and then all of the details are for example, the Act on this one here that talks about how bids are to be evaluated. If we're going with a point system, for argument's sake, or a matrix of some kind, then in the Act we could say that we would be, that the evaluation system would contain a matrix which would have the following factors. At least that would be there. Now, the details of what weight was given to what and how it was done, sure, that could be in the regulations, but at least in the Act, if we're going to go with some kind of a point system or matrix system, at least that should be referenced in the Act so we know what we're exactly talking about. And the problem is with all of these things that are left to the regulations, a lot of these things, there's no reference to them per se in the Act at all to give any direction or guidelines as to how these regulations would be written and what they would look like. So, again, we're voting to put in something in place that we really don't have a true understanding of what it is we're going to be voting for. And if we vote for it in the spirit of moving forward with the new Procurement Act, which is long needed, by the way, and something which I lobbied for over the last couple of years when I was critic for Service NL, and I questioned the minister of the day with the PCs, why hasn't it been brought forward, and so on. And I agree with having one. But if I vote for it, and some of this goes south in terms of the regulations and how it's done and it's not done properly, whatever, first thing you're going to say, well, you voted for it. If I vote against it, then I'm going to be saying, oh, so you're not in favor of a new Procurement Act. So it's a very tricky one to try to get your head around. Which way do you vote? Do you vote for it, the spirit of it, and give free reins, or do you say, no, I do support it in principle, but I cannot vote for something that I don't have the details around?
Well, and it's, once again, it's fair enough because Hansard is either your best friend or your worst enemy.
Yeah.
And what you voted for, supported in the past is always going to be held over your head, or you'll be applauded for it. And if there's gray areas that need to be discussed, not only on shows like this, but in the House of Assembly, then I guess there's some protections can be afforded to politicians. But this is up to the government to actually speak to your concerns. And I didn't mean to speak on their behalf, but it's going to be tricky to put actually locked down language on how you determine what's best value for money spent when we walk away from lowest bid wins. But it's a fair point to bring up. I'm going to see if I can get the government side to react to your very justified concerns and comments this morning. I do appreciate your time. I got to make it to the break.
Not a problem, Paddy. And like I said, I just want to say again, once for the record, that I do support a new act. I think it's long overdue. And I really believe that the government has every intention of bringing forth the best regulations that they can. I'm not saying that they won't. I have no reason to believe that they wouldn't. But the fact of the matter is that we are being asked to place an awful lot of faith in the cabinet to develop all of the stuff after the fact, when there's a lot of stuff here that we really, don't necessarily know what we would be voting to support. And that's the concern that we have.
A fair ball. Appreciate your time this morning.
Not a problem, Paddy.
Okay, Paul. Bye-bye.